Hi and welcome. This video is the first stop in a webinar series called Rebooting Learning Communities, the 7 Terms and Conditions of a Robust Learning-Centered Community. And the focus of this video recording is instructors as facilitators, facilitating class discussions, and supporting student achievement. My name is Krisztina Domjan, and I am a high-impact educator. I work at American University, where I am also an inclusive pedagogy faculty fellow, and I am the higher education co-chair at WTSL. Let's take a look at the learning objectives of this webinar. And if you browse through the 7 objectives, you can see that by the end of this session, you will be able to define the traits of Gen Z and the digital age learner. You will understand the ISTE standards for educators, being a facilitator. That's ISTE standard number 6. You will be able to link the characteristics of Gen Z's learning style and the ISTE standard number 6, facilitator. You will be able to recognize the need for facilitating equitable and inclusive discussions, identify strategies to integrate the ISTE standard for educators, facilitator in class discussion, devise the implementation of the ISTE standard for educator, number 6, and there's a surprise element as well. I hope you'll be able to guess what it is. If you take a look at this slide right here, I would like you to start looking at the information that I obtained from a very interesting publication. It's called Educating Generation Z. The Zs are all right. This publication was based on a collection of research about Gen Z. And if you go through the information here, you can see that Gen Z is indeed one of the most researched generation. And they come with very special, very specific characteristics, very interesting ones. So there's a lot to learn about them and see how we can teach them in our classes. I would also like you to pay attention to the statistics here. So for example, they learn by doing, not by listening. So it means that turning your class sessions into interactive class sessions is very important. And of course, they are tech savvy, so mixing the two is a win-win. Now, let's see what you need to know about Generation Z or the iGen. And first, let's listen to Jean Twenge, who is a psychologist, a researcher, and she's the one who actually coined the term iGen.
Then there's iGen. So if you're iGen, don't just hold up your hand, hold up your phone. And let's see of our iGeners. Yeah. So almost all of you have a phone, and almost all of them are smartphones. iGen is the first generation to spend their entire adolescence with smartphones, and that has had ripple effects across many areas of their lives. And that is also the topic of my book called iGen. So
If you happen to find her book, I can guarantee you that it's a very interesting read. I own a copy myself, and I actually have a Gen Z in my family. So it allowed me to have all the information that I needed to better educate myself about how my Gen Z learns and what I can do to help him on a weekly basis. And of course, since most of my students are Gen Z, it was extremely insightful so that once again, I could really connect to them and meet them where they are. Now let's listen to the next person. And this next person will talk about how, because you might think, well, Gen Z, okay, maybe that's just the American description. Maybe those characteristics only fit the domestic students or the American population. But this next speaker, Sinha, will convince you about something more.
We always have this belief in our mind that we know Gen Z, but we actually don't. What we most of us know about them is that they're great with internet, and they're very tech savvy, and they are superb on social media. What we don't know is that they are way more purposeful, way more compassionate, open-minded, and responsible people than any of the 3 or 4 generations before them. And that's the biggest difference about these people. And thanks to the fact that they have free flow of information around the world, the Gen Z, unlike other generations before this, are actually similar around the globe. So if you pick up a child in the States, in Canada, in India, in Japan, they will sort of exhibit similar behavior when it comes to them interacting with other people and the society at large. They're also sort of coming of age in one of the worst economic global climates ever in the last 80 years, and they will sort of need to take the world into a different sort of future that is transforming at a very, very rapid pace. Now, this is from a very interesting report in the United States by the Annie Casey Foundation in 2016. They found that over the last decade, teen birth rates in states fell by around 40%, alcohol and drug abuse dropped by 38%, and 28% kids were actually graduating at time from their high schools, which is they're way more responsible.
So as you can see that internationally, there are very, very similar characteristics. So if you feel that, well, in my classrooms, I have international students, I have students who come from all over the world, well, then the good news is that they will exhibit very similar characteristics to the Gen Zs living in the United States. And let's listen to Elizabeth Knight, who approaches the characteristics of Gen Z from yet another angle.
I believe that we have primed an entire generation to fear for their futures. Just as they enter adulthood, we give them a deadline of 12 years before irreversible damage occurs to their planet. We give them a deadline that is grounded in scientific reasoning, which they have been taught to respect and to trust, only amplifying the urgency and fear that they already experience. We give them a deadline that promises to end their futures before they even begin. I believe that we owe it to Gen Z to create a more compelling vision for the future than this, don't you think? If we do that, then we might just allow them to find their purpose and their place in the world and to enter their futures with confidence, not fear. To unlock the potential of an entire generation by allowing them to believe that the future may indeed be better. As much as I understand the fierce challenges that our world is facing and how messed up the world can seem, I also appreciate the hopes and dreams that our young people have for the future that look remarkably different to this. Generation Z, you've been taught your whole lives that you will be the leaders of the future. You've been taught to carry the tremendous weight of the world on your shoulders all the time. But that does not mean that you alone should bear the responsibility to change it. As a big dreamer, this is a quote that I live by. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. To all the young people out there, if there's any truth at all to this message, then you don't have to worry. The future is already yours.
So as you can see, what Elizabeth Knight paid attention to was mainly the fact that Gen Z, and yes, I know that we're here to learn about how we can help Gen Z to learn better, how we can implement the SD standards to reach them where they are and meet them where they are. But we also have to understand how complex their world is, how complex of a lifestyle they are having. And so why we need to understand how they operate first before we start thinking about how we can meet them where they are. And now let's listen to our last speaker for the day, who really gives us an insight of how we can relate to Gen Z as educators.
My interactions with Generation Z is to constantly approach them as a student to them. You are a student to Gen Zers. Because of their experience being inundated in the digital age, they're gonna have a lot more practical life experience about what apps you should use than you probably will. As a matter of fact, I can't tell you how many times I've asked students, hey man, like, do you think that's cool? Or what app do you use every day? And they've introduced me to some application that's made my life 20 or 30 times easier. The other thing I would suggest when interacting with this generation is trying to learn new stuff all the time. Remember that time when there were some people that said, I don't think this internet thing is worth my time, or, you know, typing on this keyboard is probably not a wise investment on my behalf. Well, those are the same parents and grandparents that are typing on smartphones with one finger today. And I prefer to text with both of my thumbs. So you guys remember that big brother that was behind the scenes pulling all the strings that I talked about? Well, the little brothers behind the scenes pulling all the strings today are our Generation Zers. So I suggest we pay attention to them like we've never paid attention before.
Very powerful indeed. And so this is exactly what I would like you to think about. How can you pay attention to them? How can you involve them? How can you be inclusive in your teaching? And of course, how can you use some of these ISTE standards to ensure that you teach Gen Z in a way that they understand learning? And so if you remember, Jean Twenge a few minutes ago talked about how this generation is so very involved with technology. And of course, we learned about how from Sinha, who talked about how this generation is very similar across the globe. And we heard from Elizabeth Knight about the complexity, the complex life that they are living in. And of course, now from Schaefer about how we should be learning about them and from them so that we have a nice synergy on a week-to-week or a day-to-day basis in our classrooms. And let me move on to the next
there's
I believe that we have primed.
Sorry, let me move on to the next slide. And so here we are. I have one question, and I wonder if you can guess the correct answer. So is it a fact or is it someone's opinion? Gen Zers already perceive their technology as an extension of themselves. And by the way, if you're using Google Slides, and if you haven't tried adding on this extension called Pear Deck, this is a slide that you can include in your Google Slides, and it's interactive. So your students can drag a sort of a magnifying glass, it's almost like a blue icon to the response that they want to choose. And so it's interactive, it asks them to be involved, and you can do this while teaching remotely, but you can also do this in the classroom. You can ask students to bring a device with them, and they can have the device open. They can follow the Pear Deck slides as you have the slide also on the big screen in the classroom. And so those students who might be sort of more timid or shy to respond, they can definitely respond in a less revealing manner using this interactive slide called Pear Deck. And so, yes, so what do you think? Is it fact or opinion? Gen Zers already perceive their technology as an extension of themselves. Now, of course, if you listen to what, or if you still remember what Jean Twenge just said, yes, they do. And something that we want to keep in mind, though, as educators, and just remember Schaefer at the end when he talked about how he asks students, show me what you do and, tell me about apps that you think work or some platforms. That's exactly what we can do. We can definitely ask students about certain things, digital tools that they already use and they feel that it works for them. So let's not be afraid of learning from them and implementing technology that they are familiar with. Now, if you hear about a great tool, there are so many webinars and workshops about using online tools or digital tools and platforms to add to our classroom environment. So if that's what you want to do, just please make sure that you try it out either with your family or your friends or colleagues first, because I would say that according to my experience, nothing frustrates Gen Z more than when the technology is not flawless. And this is exactly what the research found as well. So they definitely are ready to learn and to use technology. They're more than willing and capable of, but we have to make sure that tech works seamlessly. And let's take a look at the next statement right here. Gen Zers rank learning through YouTube just behind learning from teachers, but well ahead of lectures, textbooks, and learning apps. Now, in this case, it's I'll give you a second just to think about the options. Is it a fact, or should you say no, that's not true? Well, let me just reveal the response here, or the correct answer. Video is the medium of choice. However, the good news is we're still safe. Our jobs are still good. They want to learn from us first, but then yes, YouTube is right next, right behind us. But when we say that they want to learn from us, they definitely appreciate user-generated content, which simply means that they would prefer if we released a video tutorial, but it wasn't a video tutorial that we just picked randomly from YouTube, although it would be probably relevant to what they're learning. But if we educators, their teachers, would actually generate content and produce a video tutorial for them. This is also something that students can do themselves. They can generate content, and so us modeling it would also be very, very helpful. And so once again, when it comes to facilitating learning, sometimes instead of lecturing, just releasing video tutorials on how to complete something. It could be an instructional video. It could be sort of a mini lecture or just modeling an assignment. So anything that could help and facilitate learning will be appreciated by our students. Now let's take a look at this statement here. Online discussion platforms are a great way to get students engaged with material and with each other. So online discussion platforms. And it doesn't have to be, if you think about online discussion platforms, it doesn't mean a discussion board where you just simply type the in the chat box or in the text box. All right, so online learning, make it social. So something that you can ask yourself is exactly what you see here. How interactive are your online discussion forums? So yes, if you simply ask students to type in the text box or in a chat box, it might not be that very interactive, but you ask them to add memes or GIFs or video clips, images, drawings, sketch noted, one-pagers, mind maps. So if you start asking them to add on to that or recording themselves for a minute or two to respond, it will be a lot more engaging than simply asking students to write. Because you also want to teach the students to be more inclusive, you can, of course, ask them to type their answers, but then also to supplement their written response with visuals. All right, so let's see. How can we meet students where they are and enhance their learning experience? How can we create flexible, personalized, accessible, and interactive learning experiences, and how to provide an engaging and inclusive learning environment for Gen Z. So let's listen to two public educators talk about learner diversity. And when I mean diversity, I mean diversity is sort of an umbrella term. So there's a lot that can go into it. But basically, how can you make sure that diversity or your diverse learners are learning in an inclusive environment where they can actually participate? Now, let's listen to Sir Ken Robinson first, talking about diversity.
How many of you have got children? Can I ask you? How about 2 children? Okay. And the rest of you have seen such children, small people wandering about. I will make you a bet. If you've got 2 or more children, or you have 2 or more siblings or friends, I hope that's now included, everybody, but if you've got 2 or more children, I'll make you a bet. My bet is that they are completely different from each other, aren't they? Completely different from each other. No matter how alike they may be in some respects, you would never confuse them, would you? Like, which one are you? Remind me. You know, I'm constantly being mixed up here. And the reason I point to it is this, that our education systems are based on 3 principles which are the opposite of how human life flourishes. Apart from that, they're great. The first one is conformity. Our systems are becoming more and more standardized, whereas the great pulse of human life is diversity. We are here in all our varied differences. We are centers of unique talents and possibilities, each of us and every child. The second is our education systems are based on compliance, more and more, whereas the energy of human life is creativity and innovation. It's why you're right to say at the MIT Media Lab, kids come from college and they cannot innovate anymore. It's kind of been educated out of them. But the third is this.
All right, and if you would like to listen to the third and the entire presentation by Sir Ken Robinson, please take a look at the list of references where you can find a link to the full video clip as well. But so yes, as he pointed out, children, well, human beings are very, very different from each other. We have different strengths and weaknesses. And as educators, we have to be aware of that. So when we assign tasks, we don't assign standardized tasks that we might actually ask students to demonstrate their skills and their knowledge in different ways. Now let's listen to Richard Collada, who is the CEO of ISTE. And I would like you to realize that this recording comes from almost 10 years ago, 2013.
What I want to do is share 3 challenges that we face today in education across this country that I believe technology is uniquely suited to solve. First is this: we treat all learners the same, despite unique needs and challenges. We walk into a classroom, we have a whole group of students, and they all have different needs and backgrounds and interests, and yet we treat them as if they're all the same. The least equitable thing we can do in learning is treat all students the same, because we know they need different things, and they know they have different interests. Just imagine for a second if we approach medicine this way. Say I went to the doctor and I said, you know, I'm not feeling really well. Can you help me out? And he said, sure, what day is it today? It's Thursday. Here you go, take the white pills. No, wait a minute, don't you want to ask what's wrong? No, it's Thursday, you get the white pills. What about the guy that was in here before me? What was wrong with him? Oh, he had a heart condition. Well, what'd you give him? Well, the white pills, it's Thursday, right? That's crazy. And when we talk about it in medicine, it would outrage everybody, but yet that's what we do in hundreds and thousands of classrooms across the country every day. The second challenge is that we hold the schedule constant and allow the learning to vary. If I have a unit that I'm teaching in a week, by Wednesday, there's going to be a whole bunch of students that already get it. They're ready to move on. But tough, they got to sit through to the end of the week. And when the end of the week comes, there's going to be a group of students that still don't get it. But tough, we're moving on to learn something else that builds on what they didn't learn this week. Wonder how it's going to go for them next week. Right? And so we put keeping the schedule constant over allowing people to learn, even if the time needs to change. that should seem crazy to you.
So what I would like you to do is to think about what learner diversity means to you. How would you respond to Sir Ken Robinson's statements and the issues that he raised in his talk back in 2012? And how would you respond to Richard Collada's statements about learner diversity and how we tend to treat students the same way, giving them the same amount of time to learn a certain topic, vocabulary, skill, like mastering a certain skill? We normally give them, okay, Thursday to Thursday. So how can you become more flexible and understanding and responsive to learner diversity? So think about it for a few minutes, and you're welcome to take notes and see what you can come up with. And just a quick reminder that Rich Collada's speech is also available on the list of references, and you can listen to the entire keynote speech. And at this point, I would like to move on, and please feel free to pause every time you need more time to take in information. Or if you have questions, please write them down and email it to highered@whatisol. All right, so what I'm showing you here is basically the ISTE standards for educators. So you can see the image listing all the standards, and also the ISTE standards for students. What I would like you to do is probably spend about 10-15 minutes on clicking on these links and going to the standards themselves and read each standard. And what you can also do is you can click on the plus button to find even more information. And as you hover over the words with, in blue, the hyperlinked information, hyperlinked phrases, you can actually find even more information and tips on what you can do as an educator to meet those standards. And so this is the ISTE standards for educators. And then here, the set of standards for students. So once again, clicking on the plus buttons, there's a lot of information, and there's also some videos to watch as teachers explain how they or what they do in their classes to meet these standards. What you can do is also this. After reading each standard, so just learning about the standards themselves, what you can do is you can see how these standards for students and teachers might be similar. And for instance, you might discover that on each in each group, you can see being a learner is important, or a digital citizen. So there are certain standards that are very, very similar. And so if students learn how to be digital age learners, 21st century learners, and you train yourself to be an educator who pays attention to these standards, you can actually meet students where they are, and you can understand how they learn, and they can also notice that you are heading their way, that that you're not out of touch, that no, it's exactly the opposite, that you are in sync with their learning style as well. And so today we're focusing on being a facilitator, and that's why I pointed at that standard as well. Throughout the webinar series, we will cover all 7 standards, and facilitator is one of them. Now, facilitating, and of course, today we will be focusing on facilitating class discussions. But before we get there, just a few more slides too, until we get there, I would like you to think about something that Richard Collada mentioned at the 2013 TED speech. And that was about digital divide. And please feel free to listen to this recording and the entire talk itself. Most of you might think about digital divide as the divide between those people who have internet access, who have digital devices at home or in school. But what Collada was talking about, again, almost 10 years ago, is the divide between, let's say, teaching practices. The divide between those who know how to use technology to reimagine learning and those who simply use technology to digitize traditional learning practices. Collada claims that technology, digital devices, can actually help facilitate learning and help include all learners. Therefore, technology and knowing how to use technology well and learner diversity can actually meet. So if you use technology well, on purpose, you really think about how certain digital platforms and tools, devices can learners reach a certain learning objective or learning goals, then it means you're doing it well. If you take a look at this image right here, it simply highlights the fact that if you're using technology, but you're only using it for substitution or augmentation, it means that there's probably more to do. There's more to think about. And you know that you are lessening that divide if you're using technology to modify your teaching or to redefine your teaching. It's the reimagine learning part. And let me just play this clip just to enhance the understanding of digital divide.
I'm going to talk to you about something that keeps me awake at night. And it's a digital divide that we have in this country. And it's not the digital divide that you may be thinking of, you know, rich kids that have technology and poor kids that don't, although certainly I care about getting everybody access to technology. But there are natural market forces that are helping with that. Moore's law says that the cost of technology is coming down, connectivity is becoming ubiquitous, and so that problem is largely making progress. But there's a more serious digital divide that we face in the country. And that is the divide between those who know how to use technology to reimagine learning and those who simply use technology to digitize traditional learning practices. When I was 14, I got this thing called a flatbed scanner. And it was kind of cool because you could take a picture like this. That's my little kiddo. You could put it on the flatbed scanner, and it would turn that analog photograph into a digital photograph. Now, it didn't change the experience any. It's still a photograph. It was just a digital version of it. When I travel around the country and visit with schools, I see a similar thing happening with the way that we approach integrating technology. Maybe some of these examples will be familiar to you. We take a chalkboard, and we digitize it. We take a textbook, and we digitize it. We take a boring linear lecture, and we make digital boring linear lecture. And my fear is that if we continue on this trajectory, very soon we will have successfully replicated in digital format exactly all of the traditional teaching methods that we use today. And I'm not sure that's what we want. By the way, this is the reason I think people are still saying, does technology make a difference for learning? If you think about that, that's kind of a dumb question. It's kind of like saying, does paper make a difference for learning? Right? So I think what we really need to be doing is asking a better question. When we take these goofy studies and we say, this group of kids is going to go and use computers and learn, and this group of kids is going to do the exact same thing, but they're going to use books and paper to learn. And then we come back and go, there's no significant difference. Well, duh. Any good study is going to show that. right? What we should be doing is saying, use technology to do entirely new things that simply were not possible before, and then measure that learning experience against the traditional model and see if there's a difference. That's a useful question to be asking.
All right, so what does it mean? What can we do? And so once again, I would like you to zoom in on ISTE Standards for Educators number 6, facilitator. And of course, we are going to think about and explore how facilitating class discussions can happen with Sir Ken Robinson's message and Richard Cullada's suggestions in mind. So basically, class discussions, if you want to include the entire class, if you want to make sure that all these diverse learners can equally participate, perhaps a little bit differently, and also want to ensure that active learning takes place while the discussion is on, well, there are a few things to definitely consider. And before I will give you some tips on facilitating equitable class discussions with the help of technology, I would like you to think about your teaching experience with regard to discussions and facilitating those discussions. So think about certain elements of that, things that worked out really well. Did all the students participate? Did they participate on a similar level, to a similar extent? How meaningful their contribution was, or contributions were? So just think about all that. And what you can do is you can just, write everything down. So if you want to include technology, you might want to add Pear Deck to your teaching. So for instance, and let me start heading that way. If you use that, you can present something like this to the students, and then the students can also do that. Present their ideas with memes or GIFs. We all love stickers and colors and just visuals in general. So when I ask students to contribute, I typically ask them to bring something with them. Now, why? You might be wondering, why do you do that? Now, if you take a look at this slide right here, what I try to do, I try to gather typical characters during conversations. You have people who have no idea why are we having this conversation? What's going on? What's the point? You have people who are super nervous. And it could be because they failed previously. They just didn't have good experience about discussions. You've got students who totally missed the point. Or you have students who reveal certain, secrets or details that they probably shouldn't be revealing in public. You have those who argue, and you have those who don't really respond to others in a meaningful way, other than just nodding and saying, "Oh yeah, you're right, I completely agree." So, discussions. Facilitating discussions is not easy. There's actually a lot of things to think about and to plan before the discussion happens. And I'm talking about open class discussions or small group discussions. But something that you should keep in mind, and I recommend that you simply tell it to your students or help them figure it out, is that participation is a skill set. So class participation is not a personality trait. So if they say, "Well, I'm too shy to participate," I'll come to your office and I'll talk about it, or I'll talk to you after class. So to train them and just to help them realize that no, it's a skill set and we can get there and we can all learn that skill set. And we can all start contributing to these conversations, and we can contribute on different levels. So again, we know that there's learner diversity, so people are not going to contribute in the same exact way, but contribution in some form is going to be extremely helpful. And finally, letting students know that once they have these strong skill sets, and I call them academic skill sets, they can be transferred to other classes as well. Please take a look at this long list of benefits of class discussions. So research does show that there are countless benefits of class discussions. So it's good to have. And I understand that sometimes teachers are afraid because they think, well, and let me just go back to, because all of this can happen at once or at different times. So I know that students sometimes arrive to discussions with anxiety, teachers arrive to discussions at anxiety. But if we think about discussions as a skill set, it can be acquired, can be perfected, can be improved and transferred, then I think we have a good start. So you can go ahead and pause this slide and just read the benefits of class discussions right here, because as a facilitator, what you want to do is make sure that students get these benefits. So the question here is, how can we get there, right? How can we ensure that students receive benefits? Just a few things to consider. Allowing students to understand that participation is required and is graded, so they can feel the pressure, not too much, but a little bit of pressure. Talk about what it looks like to participate in a class discussion. Make sure that it's active, and you as a facilitator be very active facilitating, and especially initially. It's almost like you're a director and then the students are on the stage. Okay, now you respond this way. Now use your body language. And so be a very active facilitator. Teach students to ask good questions. And it's very important that the classroom environment is supportive. So nobody puts the others down or puts them in an awkward situation. So a lot of reassurance is needed. And yes, if you look at number 6, affirming student contributions and providing feedback. So telling them feedback, okay, so this was good, but next time, try to rephrase what another person said, try to respond, try to bring in this and that. So it's good to give them suggestions how to become stronger contributors, better contributors in discussions. And it's always better to start with smaller sizes. This is an image. This is a sort of a roadmap that I share with my students at the beginning of each semester. I would like them to understand that it's a learning process. So being able to participate in class discussions is not something that happens overnight. It's something that they have to learn. Just like I said, it's a skill set. They have to learn it. They have to practice it. And I also want them to understand that as a facilitator myself, I actually do my job here. And this is how I ensure that the discussion will go smoothly. So they receive the learning objectives for that class discussion. They will receive the protocol of how it's going to go down and what will be graded. So they know that this is something that was fully prepared. It wasn't just random. So if it's graded, then it has to be prepared. And technology comes into this picture because this is something that they receive online. So they receive the why, the how, and the what online, normally on the learning management system. So if you use Blackboard or Canvas or any of these LMS systems, that's where they will receive the why, the how, and the what. So step 2, and that's when the learners will have to sort of show up and start working, the mindset preparation. I call it the mindset preparation. At this point, they just have to make sure that they read the why, they read the learning objectives, they read the directions, they read the grading rubric, so that they are aware of the expectations and they know exactly why they're doing this class discussion, the point of the discussion. They learn about whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, what the protocol is, and also to understand that they are required to be inclusive themselves. It's not enough if I'm an inclusive educator and I make sure that everybody understands, and it's not enough that I'm being transparent. I ask them to do the same thing. So mindset preparation, then comes the cognitive preparation. You can't really have a great academic discussion, a dynamic discussion, without doing some reading about a certain topic. Please don't misunderstand me. Bringing in personal experience and examples are great. But providing evidence and proof from readings, from various texts and videos, can only add to the conversation. And once again, learner diversity. You might have learners with a vast experience regarding a certain topic. Some others, not much. So if you provide all of them with material, then those who have a lot of experience might emphasize those more over sort of textbook examples. But those who lack experiences can actually bring in bring in examples or contribute to the conversation from examples from a video, a radio report, or a text from a scholarly journal article or a media article. So make sure that everybody will have something to contribute. So cognitive preparation also, okay, what is the topic? How much reading do you have to complete? I ask students to take Cornell notes before they come to the class discussion, so I can verify that they are fully prepared, and also that they can ensure that they selected some images, that they selected some sentences that they can quote and paraphrase, or information that they can summarize and share with the other students during the discussion. Sometimes we all discuss the same text. Sometimes we discuss different texts and we want to add on to one piece of information by bringing in many from different sources. And of course, the number 4, facilitating the discussion. Again, that's my job, but it's also the job of the other students. So they need to understand that they are part of facilitation as well. And they should ensure that things are going smoothly, not just me. So they can remind each other to use body language, or to follow certain rules depending on what the protocol is that you're using for the discussion. But of course, as the facilitator, you have the biggest responsibility to ensure that everything goes as planned. For example, I like to use philosophical chairs as one strategy for discussions. And again, it can be in person or online, it doesn't matter. What I do, and this is once again technology, in class or online, I pull up the Pear Deck slides, the Google slides, and I ask students to read about what it means to have a discussion based on philosophical chairs. So they will spend some time exploring the details, looking at the information on this page. It's only one page long, so it's not too bad. Of course, if you have students who are not necessarily able to read everything, you can simplify the text. And I'm thinking about learner diversity and using technology. You can ask students to use Mercury Reader, which is a Chrome extension. What it does, it sort of gets rid of all the distractions. We know that students can be distracted. So if they use this extension or plugin right here, all they see is the text itself. Once again, learner diversity. Some learners or some students learn better by listening. And so for them, they can just use either an Amplify or Speechify. And so these text-to-speech tools will actually read the entire article for them. Or what you can do, once again, to simplify the information from here, you can ask students to go to Rewordify and copy-paste the text paragraph by paragraph. Rewordify simplifies the information for them so they can understand it. So there are a variety of things that you can do with technology and facilitate the learning process itself. Right, so in class, what you can do is ask students to spend some time on reading about the discussion process itself. So in this case, it's philosophical chairs. And then ask them to summarize, to sum up the key points about this process. And as you can see, because this is a Pear Deck slide, students will write their response, and then you can show their responses and briefly summarize what the expectations are. After you're done talking about or discussing, so after you're done introducing the protocol for the class discussion, you can ask, once again, using this type of Google Slides, you can ask students how they're feeling. So take a temperature check, let's say. Do they really know what the expectations are and how to participate? And this is the time where you can sort of slow down and go over the rules once again. I know that almost everyone is involved in creating Bitmoji classrooms because of remote learning. And this is something that I've been doing as well. Students know that when we resume to my classroom, that it means that, okay, we're going to discuss something or review or just rehearse, or so we're going to take a moment to go over something. And so this is when I would like to remind students to, again, following the philosophical chairs as the process, they have to use Cornell notes, let's say number 4 and 5 in their responses, listen to the question, write for 3 to 5 minutes, discuss the question for about 10 to 15. And as they respond to each other, they have to make sure that they repeat or they rephrase the thought that they just heard from another student before they add their responses. Pay attention to body language, lean forward to show that you're listening, raise your index finger or your hand if you really want to add something, or make the eye contact. So just basic body language to indicate where you are in the conversation. And of course, using visuals. We want to be inclusive. We want to make sure that when we discuss a certain concept, people will understand what that concept is, because we use visuals to supplement what say. So what I would do in class is then ask a question. For example, how is intersectionality related to stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination? 3 to 5 minutes to write. So students are using 3 to 5 minutes, and then they will start posting their responses. Now, this sort of puts the pressure on the student to actually think about it. And they sort of hold them this using the Pear Deck slides and asking them to write their responses, post their responses on the slides, sort of holds them accountable for their answers as well. Like, no, I really want you to write 3 to 5 minutes and then show me that you have been writing something, that you have actually been collecting information from your previous notes. You can choose to show student responses, or you can just use this as sort of verification that people are preparing for the discussion. And then you can resume to the discussion itself, and that's when the electronics are put away. Or if you're allowing students to use laptops, then hold the screen, sort of push it down a little bit, not all the way down, but just so it's not distracting. Or in a remote environment, just make sure that that's when we resume to, let's say, the Zoom meeting itself. So write to 3 to 5 minutes, post your answers, and then you can show the student responses, or you don't have to. And as they are writing, you can also see what they are typing, and you can correct them. So if you think that they misunderstood something, you can say, well, see, I know that you want to say this, and this is okay, but you might want to check page 25 and just revisit that statement there. So again, technology can be helpful. This is where you can correct students before they actually share something that they might have misunderstood and they might feel embarrassed. So you can prevent that from happening. You don't have to, but this is just one thing that you can do. Another thing that students can do is sort of opening a box full of questions. And this is less tech-based, more analog, but it can work. And this is when you can simply ask students to literally gather a box full of ideas and write the ideas down. And once they either sit around in a circle or they are joining the discussion remotely, they can actually show the information that they saved to the camera. So then the students can read. It could also be let's say a direct quotation from a text. They can also share screen. And if it's not a literal box to which they collected and gathered information, but it's sort of a virtual box, that they can share screen. So make sure that they can become co-hosts, share screen, and talk about important ideas that they, or information that they obtained from texts, but then also add images. Once again, adding images is super important. So then those who are new to a concept or a piece of information can actually understand it. Students can talk about Kimberly Crenshaw and intersectionality, but if they don't see a picture of Kimberly Crenshaw, if they don't see a clip of her talking about it on TEDx, and perhaps the definition typed out, just someone saying those words might not reach everyone in that discussion. All right, so I think that I have exposed you to some ideas about how to be a facilitator and how to live up to standard number 6 for ISTE standards for educators. And if you have similar tips, please feel free to share your ideas. How can you use technology to meet students where they are. How can you be a better facilitator? How can you be a better facilitator? How can you facilitate with the help of technology, with learner diversity in mind, making sure that they are all included? Thank you.